Have you ever found yourself envying someone, not out of bitterness, but with a strange, burning clarity? Have you ever looked at another's strength, their brilliance, their boldness, and felt that ache in your chest that you couldn't quite name? Perhaps you've been told to suppress that feeling, to feel ashamed of it, to cast it away like some unworthy instinct. But what if I told you that envy is not a flaw to be hidden, but a spark to be kindled? Nietzsche, one of the most fiercely honest minds in history, saw what many still fear to acknowledge. Envy is a sign that your spirit has not yet surrendered. Those who feel envy are not weak, they are awake. Those who can still burn with longing have not gone numb. The world teaches us to deny envy, to pretend we are satisfied, to reject desire as if wanting more were a moral failure. But Nietzsche offers something far more daring, a path where envy is not an illness, but a compass, a force, a whisper from your future self, calling you to rise. He believed that envy, when faced with courage, is not poison. It is the will to power in disguise. It reveals where you feel small so that you might grow. It shows you what you admire, not to punish you, but to invite you to become it. This message is for you who feel inferior, overshadowed, stuck in the shadows of those who dare more. Speak louder, live bolder. For you who watches others take the stage while you remain on the sidelines. For you who confuses humility with self-erasure. Nietzsche would not tell you to silence envy. He would tell you to listen to it fiercely, because buried beneath that discomfort is a map, a mirror, a cry from your own potential. And if you ignore it, you do not become virtuous, you become stagnant. Perhaps you've mistaken your envy for weakness, but today, I will show you that envy is one of the strongest forces in the human soul. When you have the strength to let it push you forward, instead of letting it rot you from within. True transformation does not begin with comfort. It begins with friction, with tension, with the unignorable awareness that you could be more. Get ready to see envy in a new light, not as shame, but as signal, not as darkness, but as the fire that awakens your will. Let's dive into Nietzsche's ideas and discover how to use envy not to tear others down, but to build yourself up into someone who no longer envies, because they've become what they once desired. Why do we feel such a need to respond, to correct, to defend, to prove that we are right? Because, deep down, we have been trained, tamed like housebroken animals, to believe that truth must be protected with noise, that silence means surrender, and that envy must be hidden like a shameful wound. But Nietzsche saw through this illusion. He saw that our frantic reactions, our fear of being silent, our denial of envy, all stem from the same weakness, the terror of appearing small, of admitting that we lack something. And what lies beneath that fear? A fragile ego, terrified of being exposed, clinging to borrowed identities, mistaking applause for truth. Nietzsche taught that most people do not defend their beliefs because they are strong, but because they are terrified of what would remain if those beliefs were shaken. Their arguments are not a search for truth, they are armor. Their indignation is not courage, it is the panic of the domesticated spirit afraid to face its own emptiness. And what does this have to do with envy? Everything. Because envy is the rawest acknowledgement of lack. It is the trembling recognition that someone else has become something you could be. Most repress this recognition. They cover it with moral masks, with smug detachment, with petty critique. But Nietzsche would say, don't hide it, use it. The moment you feel envy is the moment life itself is calling you to rise. To feel envy and then try to prove you're above it is to fall into the same trap as justifying your opinion. It's to submit to the expectations of the herd. Herd morality teaches you to be content, to be modest, to play nice. But envy defies that. It says, you could be more, and that is dangerous. That is divine. Because only those willing to confront their envy can transcend it, not by silencing it, but by outgrowing it. True strength, Nietzsche said, is not found in convincing others of your worth. It is in standing firm in your becoming, especially when that becoming makes others uncomfortable. It is in being misunderstood and unshaken. The noble spirit does not suppress envy, he transforms it. He sees it not as shame, but as a compass pointing to untapped potential. That is the will to power, not the desire to dominate others, but the fire to surpass oneself. If you want to know what real power looks like, look not to the one who argues loudest, but to the one who uses even their envy as fuel. The one who, in the presence of greatness, does not resent, but becomes greater still. Nietzsche's Ubermensch does not deny desire, he refines it. He does not hide envy, he transmutes it into will. So then, how do we express this power without reacting, without shouting, without justifying? How do we let envy carve us into something worthy of our longing? Nietzsche gave us the answer, not through words, but through transformation, through the radical act of self-overcoming. Nietzsche did not write for the content, the passive, or the satisfied. He wrote for the few who have the courage to confront the raw forces within themselves, their rage, their fear, their envy, and transfigure them into strength. He wrote for those who understand that every discomfort is a doorway, and that envy, far from being a shameful flaw, is one of the purest signs that your spirit still longs to ascend. To Nietzsche, the average person lives enslaved by norms, morality, and the need for recognition. They are crushed under the weight of what they are expected to be. But there exists another type of human, rare, dangerous, free. The Ubermensch, the overman, is not shackled by envy. He uses it. He does not deny his hunger when he sees greatness. He lets it burn until it forges something higher within himself. And the most remarkable part, he does this without complaint, without applause, often in complete silence. The Ubermensch does not envy in order to imitate or possess. He envies in order to become. His longing is not desperate, it is dignified. It is not the whimper of a lesser spirit, but the focused tension of one preparing to outgrow itself. He observes quietly, he listens deeply, he does not lash out. He lets envy sharpen him, stretch him, discipline him, because he has understood what others flee from, that envy is not weakness. It is the first pulse of your future self trying to awaken. This is not passive admiration. It is a focused, alchemical process. While others project, he reflects. While others hate what they lack, he studies it. His envy is not loud. It is poised. It is a force that waits, calculates, and builds. Because the Ubermensch knows, every time you react from inferiority, you reveal your position. But when you respond from becoming, you transcend it. His envy does not leak, it transforms. He does not envy others because he wants what they have. He envies because he knows he is capable of reaching more. And this quiet certainty, this refusal to justify or perform, is threatening. While others scream for attention, he stands with unwavering presence. His silence unsettles because it reveals something terrifying, that he does not need permission to evolve. In a world addicted to noise and affirmation, the one who uses envy to ascend becomes untouchable. Nietzsche saw the Ubermensch as one who does not beg to belong. He redefines the terms of belonging. He is not trapped by guilt, fear, or the need for approval. That is why he is feared, because nothing is more destabilizing than someone who cannot be manipulated, especially by their own envy. And when he speaks, it is not to complain, it is to disrupt. His words are not explanations, they are revelations. But this leads to a deeper question. What makes envy so unsettling when it is silent, disciplined, and directed inward? Why do so many feel threatened when someone doesn't deny their envy, but uses it to rise? What happens in the minds of those who encounter a spirit that transforms longing into becoming? Because to understand the power of envy, you must first understand the chaos it reveals, not in others, but in yourself. And believe me, that chaos is your greatest source of strength. Envy is not just an uncomfortable emotion, it is a mirror, and what it reflects for most is unbearable. When you feel envy and dare not repress it, you are not weakening. You are confronting your own potential. You are forcing yourself to hear the voice within that says, you are not yet what you could be. And that shatters illusions. Because most people do not envy out of malice. They envy to avoid looking at the distance between who they are and what they could become. And then, when you own your envy rather than conceal it, the mask of mediocrity begins to slip. Nietzsche understood this long before psychology gave it a name. Envy is not a failure of character, it is a signal of capacity. Most deny it to preserve the fragile shell of self-satisfaction. But when you let it burn in you, when you observe it with clarity and without shame, it becomes a forge, and everyone around you feels it, because envy that is not denied, but directed, becomes presence, pressure, power. Social instinct tells us to hide envy, to moralize it, to mask it with false virtue. But Nietzsche knew that all suppression is a confession of weakness. When you don't react with bitterness or self-pity, but with transformation, those who thrive on your submission feel the shift. They panic. They relied on your insecurity to maintain the illusion that they were above you. Your quiet resolve, your refusal to shrink, threatens their borrowed power. This is why envy, when transfigured, exposes manipulation. People who depend on superiority, social, intellectual, emotional, lose their ground when you stop needing to deny your desire to rise. They need your envy to remain shameful. They need it hidden, silent, poisoned. But when you confront it without guilt, it is they who become exposed. Because now you are not pretending you don't want more. You're becoming more, and that terrifies those who never dared to grow. But envy doesn't only disturb others, it disrupts you. It awakens unresolved truths, your forgotten ambition, your neglected talents, your buried hunger to transcend the ordinary. It forces you to realize you have settled, that your current self is not the summit, and that realization is painful. It is a kind of death, the death of illusion. And Nietzsche would say, good, because only when illusions die can something greater be born. So when you embrace envy, you are not indulging in weakness. You are breaking the spell. You are slicing through the story that told you to be content with less. And yes, it's uncomfortable. It will go against every moral reflex drilled into you. You will be told to feel ashamed, to feel wrong. But that discomfort, that's the price of transformation. And only the strong can pay it. And that's strength. That is power. Now that you understand how envy operates beneath the surface, how it unmasks others and reveals your own neglected fire, it's time to stop avoiding it. Stop fearing it. Begin using it strategically, consciously, with ruthless clarity. Not to destroy others, but to become what they never imagined you could be. The time has come to stop merely intellectualizing envy and begin wielding it. Because understanding without transformation is cowardice dressed as knowledge. From now on, you will learn to convert your envy into a weapon of precision, not as a bitter reaction, but as a sharpened force aimed directly at your own stagnation. The first step is brutal in its honesty. Allow yourself to feel envy fully, without flinching, without moralizing. Let it burn when your ego demands comfort. This requires strength, because everything in you will want to deny it. You will want to tell yourself you're above it, that you're satisfied, that you don't want what others have. But that self-deception is the true poison. Every time you lie to yourself, you surrender your power. You show that you still care about appearances, that you are still playing by the herd's rules. True self-overcoming begins the moment you stop hiding from your envy and start listening to it. When you recognize that it is not shameful, but meaningful. It is not corruption, it is potential. The second movement is observation. While others chase status, mimic trends, and try to fabricate significance, you study. You watch not with jealousy, but with ruthless curiosity. Not to copy, but to understand what calls you to grow. You observe the lives that provoke you, the people who unsettle you, not as enemies, but as signposts. Their power is not your loss, it is a mirror. And when you finally move, if you move, it will be with the precision of someone who has faced their longing and turned it into evolution. The third discipline, time. Let envy linger. Let it build tension inside you. Do not rush to numb it or explain it away. Because tension is power. The more you can hold that discomfort without breaking, the more you will sharpen your will. While others seek relief, you remain in the fire. You use it to shape yourself. A glance at what you could be, a path you did not take, a power you have not yet claimed, can be more transformative than 1,000 affirmations. The fourth discipline, unpredictability. When you stop suppressing envy and start using it strategically, you become unpredictable. And what cannot be categorized will always be feared. When they no longer know what you envy or why, you gain the upper hand. You become unreadable, dangerous, free. You reverse the dynamic. No longer reactive, You become the one who imposes new values. At this point, envy is no longer a flaw, it is fuel. But beware, do not confuse this with petty ambition. Nietzsche despised the small-minded pursuit of status. The envy we speak of here is not the envy of the mediocre. It is the envy of the becoming, the ache of a spirit stretching toward its highest form. You are not grasping, you are transfiguring. You are not imitating, you are creating a version of yourself that makes the old one obsolete. A single act from this place, one decision, one leap, can shatter the narrative others built around you. Not because it is loud, but because it is undeniable. But here's the darker truth. Not all envy becomes power. There are times when envy is not strategy, it is stagnation. When it no longer drives you, but drains you. When you envy without action. When you admire without movement. And without noticing, you give your power away day after day, silently, consistently, fatally. This is the most dangerous stage, when envy becomes a quiet resignation. When it no longer burns, but suffocates. When your silence is no longer strength, but a whisper of a life unlived. And Nietzsche knew this. He saw how the world builds systems on those who envy but never act, on those who admire but never become. Is there anything more tragic than envying in silence and believing that this is somehow noble? It is being conditioned to see your longing as shameful, to swallow your hunger for greatness, to convince yourself that desiring more is a weakness. You were taught that envy is ugly, that ambition must be tempered, that wanting what another has makes you small. But what if I told you this is a trap? That envy in its raw and unfiltered form is not a sin, but a signal. Nietzsche saw this with ruthless clarity. What most people call contentment is often just a quiet surrender of the soul. Have you noticed how you talk yourself out of your own potential? How you downplay your desires just to maintain some illusion of humility or peace? Others assert themselves, chase power, claim space that could have been yours, and you let them. You convince yourself that it's not your place, that to desire is to betray your ethics, that to want more is to be selfish. But here is the truth. You are paying a steep price for denying your fire. And the worst part, those around you know you won't rise. Nietzsche described this as slave morality, a morality born not from strength but from weakness, a system created by the powerless to survive in a world they could not dominate. It glorifies submission, guilt, and meekness. It tells you that envy is wrong, ambition is dangerous, and power must be feared. It teaches you to shrink and feel righteous for it. But Nietzsche did not write for the self-silencing. He wrote for those willing to break free, for those who recognize that every pang of envy is a message from the deeper self. You were made for more. When you suppress envy, you don't become virtuous, you become harmless. You are no longer living by your own will. You are being sculpted by others' expectations. You are not yourself. You are what others need you to be to feel superior. And this is the very opposite of the will to power. Because Nietzsche's will to power is not about shouting louder or dominating others. It is about becoming yourself completely. It is about reclaiming your inner narrative, about wanting without shame, about envying not from the shadows, but from a position of strength, one that says, I will become what I desire. The envy of submission must die. And in its place, the envy of ascension must be born. The envy that does not whine, that does not beg, that does not disguise itself as humility. The envy that stands tall, sharp, unapologetic. The envy that transforms longing into action. This is the envy Nietzsche would honor, the kind that awakens the will to rise, not to copy others, but to transcend your current self. But how do you reach that level? How do you stop envying passively and start envying powerfully? How do you kill the morality of the herd within you and be reborn as someone who rises by instinct? The answer lies in Nietzsche's greatest figure, the Ubermensch. And now I need you to grasp one thing with all the clarity you can summon. Envy is not shame. It is not a weakness. It is not a flaw to be silenced. True envy is a force, a signal of vitality. It is the mark that you are still alive enough to desire transformation. Nietzsche never wrote for those who are content to coast through life, shackled by mediocrity and moral resignation. He wrote for those who dare to transcend, those willing to confront the discomfort of wanting more and becoming more, even when it burns. The envy of the Ubermensch is not petty. It is not reactive. It is not born of inferiority. It is the envy of a spirit so full of will, it aches to evolve. It is not the whimper of a victim, but the tension of a warrior who already sees who he could become. This envy does not beg, it builds. It does not resent others' power. It recognizes it as a mirror, a challenge. It is the still, inward gaze of one who knows exactly what he lacks and dares to claim it without apology. Now look at your life. How many times have you buried your envy out of fear, out of guilt, out of not wanting to disturb the image you crafted of humility? How many times have you let others rise while you stood still, telling yourself that you don't need that? Enough. Nietzsche would say that denying this sacred fire within you is an insult to life itself, that suppressing envy is betraying your potential. From today on, your envy must change its function. It must stop being a silent ache and become a declaration of intent, a compass, a challenge, a vision of who you are becoming, even if no one around you sees it. Because who you are is not defined by others' understanding. It is defined by your will to surpass yourself. And that takes courage, the kind of courage that does not seek approval, but affirms itself in the face of resistance. Because desire has power, even when it's unspoken, and envy, when embraced without shame, becomes will. So don't stop here. The next chapter is essential. It will stretch your mind beyond comfort and into confrontation. Watch it, not for me, but because you owe yourself more than silence. And remember, the weak deny envy, the strong transmute it, and the noble use it to become what no one thought possible.